Good afternoon. My name is Caleb Slinkard. I'm the senior editor of the Macon Telegraph. Thanks for taking the time to join our discussion on violent crime in Macon. We're going to talk about what local leaders are doing to address it and how you can help. This is an exclusive event for Telegraph subscribers. Last year, there were more than 50 homicides in Macon, Bibb County, which was a modern day record. Violence is an issue that impacts our community in profound ways, and yet it's something that many of us feel powerless to address. My goal today is to introduce you to some folks who deal with violence on a daily basis and the impact of that violence, discuss some of the factors that led to that violence, and give you some opportunities to help discuss some potential solutions as well. Joining me today is Jamie Borman, Deputy Director of the Crisis Line and Safe House of Central Georgia, Macon Bibb County Sheriff David Davis, and community organizer and businessman Carl Meyers. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
How's it going?
Hello, good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Obviously, this is something that during quote unquote normal times we'd love to have in person, but because of the pandemic, we're going to be doing this virtually. And so we appreciate everybody's patience with that. Jamie, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and specifically the Safe House Crisis Line of Central Georgia and the work that you do there.
Okay. My name is Jamie Borman. I'm the Deputy Director for Crisis Line and Safe House of Central Georgia. Crisis Line and Safe House is a nonprofit organization that provides services to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in Central Georgia. We serve 7 counties. So we serve Bibb County as well as Crawford, Peach, Twiggs, Jones, Monroe, and Houston. Our services are, there's a wide array of services that we provide. We have like our name suggests, a crisis hotline. It's available 24 hours a day to anyone in the community seeking help, not just domestic violence or sexual assault, but anyone who needs resources. And that is, we have trained staff answering that hotline every day of the year. We also have a safe house, as our name suggests. We have a 12-bed shelter facility that is confidentially located where survivors of domestic violence and their children can come for respite. We also offer legal services. So we have advocates who assist with the paperwork for protective orders, which are a type of restraining order that victims of domestic violence and stalking can apply for with the courts. And we also have staff attorneys that assist with things like divorces or child custody, things related to a victimization that are legal needs. We also have counselors. We have 2 master's level therapists on staff that do both one-on-one counseling as well as support groups, again, for domestic violence and sexual assault victims and their children. And then we also have 2 sexual assault centers. We have one in Macon and one in Warner Robins. And at those centers, we offer 24-hour care to people who've experienced sexual violence. We have nurses on staff who provide forensic exams. We have advocates on staff who provide things like bedside advocacy, follow-up care, accompaniment to court, accompaniment to medical treatment, things like that after an assault has occurred. And the way to access all of those services is through our hotline.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, I remember in discussions with you just kind of being really impressed with the scope and the detail of all of the work and the services that you all provide here in Middle Georgia. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sheriff Davis, we'll go to you next. I think many of our subscribers know who you are, but for those who may not understand kind of your tenure with the Sheriff's Office, could you talk a little bit about how long you've been with the Sheriff's Department and specifically what you see your primary role as sheriff being?
Well, thank you, Caleb. It's good to be here. I am Sheriff David Davis, Sheriff of Bibb County. I've been at the Sheriff's Office. This is starting my 42nd year, and I'm starting my 3rd term as sheriff. So I grew up here in Macon. Have seen Macon grow and change over the years, and have grown with the Sheriff's Office. And back in 2014, when consolidation came between the city of Macon and Bibb County, the Sheriff's Office became the main law enforcement agency for the county. So over about 7 years now, the Macon Police Department was merged into the Sheriff's Office, and we've been providing law enforcement services for the whole county. That includes regular police services, but then the other services that you think about, what a jail does, what a sheriff does, and that's running the jail, running the courts, warrants service and all of those different other functions, civil process and those kinds of things. So we are a full service law enforcement agency. We're one of the largest law enforcement agencies in Georgia as far as sheriff's office. We're about the fifth largest sheriff's office in Georgia, and we're one of the top 10 largest police departments in Georgia. And so coming with that in a metropolitan setting, you have all of those type challenges and some of the things that we see, certainly with the violence. Our first responsibility in law enforcement is to find out who committed the crimes, whether it's someone breaking in a house or someone stealing a car or someone committing the ultimate crime of taking another person's life. And our investigators do a good job with that. We could not do it without the help and support of the community, having that trust in our abilities, that trust in what our deputies do and our investigators to be able to give us that information and to have a connection with us and a rapport with us so that we can solve these crimes. And we have a very good solve rate. Out of the 51 that we've had this year, we've solved 40 of them. We have people of interest. We have people of interest in about another 4 or 5 and some warrants to be served in others. So really, out of all of them, there's only just a handful that we are what you would call classic whodunits, that we don't have any solid leads right now. And so that's a testament to this community and the involvement of our people in this community to want to help get these people off the street that are responsible for these violent acts. And also part of our job also is to be involved with the community through our outreach efforts in the schools and in the streets to mitigate some of the conditions that are present that cause some of these underlying issues that result in violence, and making those connections with the youth. And as we talked about before, COVID has really impacted that on all levels. And I think you see in this uptick in violence all across the state and all over the country. So that's just part of what we do, and reach out and partner with whoever wants to help us and that we can help mitigate these situations.
Absolutely. And a lot of those things that you kind of discussed, Sheriff, we're going to touch on as well throughout this discussion. So I'm happy you brought many of those issues up. And then our third panelist, Carl Meyers, this is a subscriber exclusive event. So many of our subscribers read Carl's story in this Sunday's Telegraph. Obviously, Jenna Easton wrote that story, and I think it was kind of remarkable. Carl is somebody who, has had if you've read the story, has had an interesting past. And Carl, tell us a little bit about, obviously, you had a criminal conviction, served prison time, and then really starting in prison, found faith and kind of started rebuilding your life to the point where now you're building into other people, educating others, and helping others learn from your experience. And so what's kind of your primary message from your life experiences that you try to share with people in Macon to help make our community a better place?
My message is really my life, and my life consists of, growing up, in a good family, and then that family being broken up, and then from there, the hate inside of me, and really just becoming a product of my environment, suffering from poverty, suffering from crime, suffering from different things, and the things that I was attracted to at that time. Going in prison, I became reformed, and just seeing that the things that I was attracted to back then, those things didn't matter now. And my return back to civilization, society, I wanted to, the same reformation process that I went through, I want to give that to the community. So that's really been my goal since I've been out, and that's really my message.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Carl, and thanks to everybody for joining us. And we'll go ahead and kick this discussion off. And what I'm going to do is I'll ask, questions to specific people, and then if others want to jump in and kind of respond, you're more than welcome to. And hopefully just, have kind of a free-flowing discussion about this issue and what we can do to address it. So, Sheriff Davis, I'm going to start with you. One of the questions we received from one of our readers was in regards to it's tough to really pinpoint exactly why there may be an uptick in violence. And obviously, there's a lot of factors that lead into it. But in your experience last year and maybe even so far this year, are there any notable mitigating circumstances that seem to be driving this increase in violence, whether it's alcohol and drug use or pandemic related or any of the kinds of issues that we talked about? Can you kind of give us an idea of what some of those factors might be?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved in it. One of the most basic factors is an inability to stop and think. We see so many of these cases that are just spur of the moment, that someone has a conflict with another person, and right then they get white hot angry, and they happen to have a firearm in their hand, and then the tragedy results. And so it's that inability to stop and take account of what your actions consequences may come from that. There are circumstances, some of them domestic. We've seen some domestic cases this year. We saw cases this year where we had multiple victims, and that's sort of outside the norm for what we typically have in homicides, where we had other family members or other domestic in the household members that were killed at one time. That's sort of an outlier for what we typically see. We see situations that people seem to be at their wits' end when it goes back to that inability to stop and use a little bit of self-restraint and self-control, and then you enter a firearm into it, and then disaster results. We've had cases where people are at the wrong place at the wrong time. We've had cases where people are at some of these illegal liquor establishments, shot houses, you call them, liquor houses. During the pandemic, we had a lot of bars and restaurants that were closed down. People were finding other places to be that are not regulated, that are not that don't have security, and then conflicts erupt there. Our investigators have been working on shutting a lot of those places down. We've done that. So there's a lot of different factors that have gone into the circumstances this year. But I think that inability to stop and think about your consequences, as well as the underlying issues of the uncertainty of what we've been dealing with the pandemic. Lots of people have lost their jobs. The uncertainty of what's going to happen next. You can imagine if you're already in conditions where that you're living an uncertain life, and then you add these kinds of conditions, particularly in a domestic type setting, the pressure can get unbearable, and then you add a firearm in there, and it can become tragic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheriff. Carl, I want to go to you. And Sheriff mentioned something about kind of the impact of the poverty, the role that poverty plays in this, and the impact of it on violence. And in our discussion earlier this week, you had some really keen insight in terms of, for some folks, imagining a violent response to something kind of seems, incredible, something they wouldn't consider. But for other folks, sometimes there are limited options and there are other stressors. Can you speak to the role that you feel poverty plays in violence, particularly in Macon, and how that impacts the way that people respond to situations?
Yes, I think poverty plays a major role. I just want to go back to the statement that Sheriff said as far as people not having a chance to think. And that, to me, is the root of poverty, and that's what it does. It's more so of survival than living. And when you're surviving, you're thinking animalistic and you're thinking instinct, right? So a lot of these decisions that are made are not being thought out, and a lot of these actions turn out to be bad because of the poverty. And when we look at poverty, we have to look at why is there poverty in certain areas, and because of the why, how can we solve it? And that's really my angle on the community coming together and trying to stop that, because to me, that's the root of everything.
And I think that's really important, Carl. You talk about kind of the poverty and economic factors that lead to violence, and specifically kind of in your experience in the community and your experience in Macon. What are some of the challenges to helping folks who are struggling with poverty, basically have access to the resources they need? What are some of those challenges or barriers that you've seen to improving that situation for people in Macon?
Some of the challenges is just job opportunities, lack of skills, and just the lack of. That's what, to me, Macon is suffering from, just the lack of. You have people in position that can do some things, but it's very limited to what they can do and how many people it can reach. So it's basically a community thing where everybody has to come together and provide these opportunities. That is, the answer to the problem, to me, in my eyes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carl, for that perspective. Yes, Sheriff.
We did some little run through some statistics of our victims and suspects, and because we have this particular stat covered both victims and suspects, because many of these cases, both victims and suspects are living under the same conditions, whether they are domestic or whether they happen to know each other. They're both in the same sort of circumstance. So 65% of the people who were involved in the homicides last year, whether they were victims or suspects, were unemployed. Only 20% of them had a job. The rest of them were either students or retired. So as we were talking about, as Carl was talking about, that poverty and that underlying, that stressor in and of itself, that unemployment, that poverty, that blighted conditions is a constant. So it's like having a constant toothache all the time, and then you add some other stressor, COVID, conflict, that just compounds it and makes it even more serious.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing those statistics. Sheriff, I didn't even know that. So that it really is remarkable. And speaking of, things that can add to that stress and the anxiety, obviously we're well versed in the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted this issue and countless other issues in our community. And Jamie, tell me a little bit about what you and your organization have seen in terms of the impact of COVID-19 on maybe the volume of need in the community for the services that you provide, and the kinds of things that you're seeing in terms of need from the clients that you serve.
Sure. So there are some unique barriers that victims of domestic violence face in leaving violent relationships when there's not a pandemic. Things like finances, or their children, or access to affordable housing, access to transportation, things like that. When you compound that with a pandemic where the recommendation is that we all stay home, it just further compounds the issues that someone would face in trying to leave the relationship. And so, you can imagine it would, a lot of times survivors feel already like they're trapped. And then there's the added piece of being told, okay, well, the best way to stop the spread of this virus is to stay home. So now they feel literally trapped with their abusive partner. And so we have seen a huge increase in requests for service for our shelter program. I ran some numbers before this presentation, and in 2020, the 10 months that we were in the pandemic, we had 5 months that we were over 100% capacity for our shelter. Some months we were up to 180% capacity. And we were really fortunate to get some emergency funds from various sources to be able to provide shelter outside of our shelter facility and use some hotel space to house the extra requests for service. And so we've been able to accommodate, and we've been really proud that none of our services have stopped during the pandemic. We've, of course, had to figure out ways to provide them remotely, or in ways that we can keep our clients safe and our staff safe from COVID. But we haven't had to stop any services. We've still been able to provide protective orders. We've still been able to do forensic exams, but the shelter is really where we saw the biggest increase. And I think that ties back to the fact that folks didn't have this. You couldn't just go to your neighbor's house. You couldn't just go to your family member's house without
Right.
the fear of spreading the virus. And I think that's probably in part or part of the result of the pandemic, compounded with the barriers that victims already face.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that until we kind of discussed some of those issues, I hadn't really considered. But, when we talk about the impact of COVID-19, we think about health, direct health impacts and economic impacts. But the fact that it's creating unique barriers for folks who already struggle, I think is a story that we need to continue to tell. And I think that that's something too, Sheriff, that in talking about kind of the stressors that we've talked about in the past, the pandemic specifically has created a lot of kind of anxiety and concern from folks. What do you kind of see in terms of how your deputies and the organizations that you've worked with have responded to those particular stressors and anxiety? I mean, is there anything as a law enforcement agency that you're able to do, or is it something where you're just kind of trying to weather the storm with the rest of us?
Well, it is stressors. You have to remember each and every one of our deputies also has these same concerns and worries about, am I going to get the disease? We are now working on getting our first responders and deputies the vaccine. So I think that there is some hope down the road, but every walk of life is having to come up with new ways of doing things. The interactions with people, and as Jamie mentioned, people are together more and have that opportunity for conflict to arise. And I think that's one of the reasons we saw some of the domestic violence that we saw, the tragic violence that resulted in people losing their life because of some of these conditions, and people can't get out and interact with others and blow off steam or have a place to go out and meet with other folks to give them some strength and encouragement and guidance. That's sort of been missing during this pandemic time. So we're having to adjust to that. Our deputies, we have to answer the calls. We have to go out and be as safe as we can, but we also have to know that those officers in their walk of life are just as concerned and worried about catching the COVID, but they have risen to the challenge and have gone out. We've had a number of our people who have had it and had to be out and adjust our workflow and our work assignments based on that. So it really has been a challenge. So we're no different than anybody else, having that underlying stress on our people to help, to go out and help others get over their stresses and to investigate the resulting crimes and conditions.
Absolutely. And I think that makes a lot of sense. That's something that we have to keep in mind, is that not only is this pandemic impacting the people who are victims of or perpetrators of violence, it's also impacting folks that y'all work with who are responding to it. And Carl, I want to go back to you. You discussed obviously the impact of poverty on the situation. What are some areas that you feel like a greater amount of investment, whether that's resources from the community or effort from nonprofits or various neighborhoods and communities coming together? What areas do you feel like we as a community could invest in to improve violence, to prevent it, to respond to it more effectively, whether it be education or job training or other kind of social infrastructure? What are some ways that we can invest to improve the situation?
The first investment I would say would definitely be education, and that education is not the education from the school. It's just the education of self and the education of life and how humanity needs to be, the right education. The ignorance in the community is the cause of the crime. Because we don't know certain things, we react certain ways. And just the value of self, the value of a human being, the value of man, woman, and child, that needs to be taught, and that investment needs to be first.
Absolutely. And I know that one of the other areas that we've talked about, Carl, in the past is also, we see a lot of challenges when it comes to mental health, both in awareness and services. What role do you feel like maybe a lack of mental health services or even a lack of awareness of those issues plays in the issues that lead to violence in our community?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because when I was in prison, there was a lot of services that was offered that I was like, wow, if this was only offered on the street, the world would be a better place. So on the point of mental health, I definitely think that mental health counselors need to be assigned to certain areas, especially the poverty-stricken areas. And beyond the mental health, the Thinking for Change classes, the Motivation for Change classes, the Alcohol Anonymous classes, the Narcotics Anonymous, because people are suffering from problems that, there's not a lot of places out there that they can get help, or those places that can help, they're not being promoted. So I feel like as a community, we need to bring that to the forefront.
Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting aspect too. And Jamie, I kind of want to ask you about that too. I know that your organization obviously provides counseling services for for individuals who have experienced specific situations, and obviously we can't get into details about those discussions. But just kind of in your experience, or in speaking with your counselors, or your experience of that organization, what are some of the challenges or barriers to kind of awareness about mental health issues or mental health resources? And what are some of the things that y'all try to do to combat the impact of violence and the impact of mental health issues on violence itself?
So our therapists are providing services to survivors. And so we're really addressing the effects of trauma on survivors. And that trauma looks different for everybody. So there really is no one thing that our therapists are addressing, but most importantly, we just want folks to have an opportunity to get feedback on how they're feeling, and to know that what they're feeling is normal. And the reality of domestic violence is that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not happening independent of things like love and care in a relationship. And so it can be really hard for survivors to sort of wrap their head around how someone they love and care about can also be someone who is terrorizing them. And so our therapists help with that. And it's really important for those who wish to get counseling to have that option to help them overcome that trauma and to overcome the feelings that they're having as a result of what they've been through. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like that trauma-informed therapy is something that it seems like it's fairly new, but it's really intentional in talking about how, the impact of trauma just on the way that people think and respond to things is so significant. And unless you've experienced that, or unless you've been trained to kind of respond to that, I think that sometimes the average individual may not realize that. But I think in speaking to and just listening to Carl and Sheriff Davis also speaking about some of the issues that they're experiencing, I think we probably also have a community. Well, I know that we have a community that's dealt deeply with trauma. I mean, you just talk about more than 50 homicides in 1 year. Both the victims of those homicides, the family members, even the emergency first responders who have to respond to that. That's a tremendous amount of trauma that our community is bearing. And I think that that's probably something that we haven't been able to address from a community perspective. And I just wonder, Jamie, obviously, communal trauma is different than trauma from a specific incident that somebody's experienced. But in your experience in working with an organization that deals with people who've experienced traumatic events, what is some of the impact of that trauma, and how do you even kind of identify that or start to kind of deal with some of that?
So I think, again, it's unique to the person. It's unique to their experiences. I think what's really important is to, from a service provider perspective, to go into it with an open mind and an open heart to what the person has experienced, and to really hear what they're saying. One of the things that we that's sort of a tenet in our advocacy is that the victim is her own expert or his own expert. They know their situation better than we ever could. We could have, a 5-minute conversation. We could have a 5-day conversation. We're still not going to understand their situation the way that they do. And so hearing them, believing them, and then trying to find solutions based on what they're asking for. So a lot of times, I've been guilty of this myself. It's like, okay, well, here's all the things that you can do without really considering what specific thing is going to help them at the time. It's not to say that all of the services or all of the options or all of the referrals aren't important, but I'm really hearing what they're saying they need. And if they don't know, really helping them to explore what it is that they need. And so I think that it really starts with coming at these situations. So coming at service provision from an open place as the person who's the provider, to really hear what they're saying that is that they need.
And that's something that's key too, is that openness to not just assume or apply solutions that we think will work or have worked in the past to every community or every individual, and just kind of continue to try the same things and kind of have those result in similar experiences. Carl, one of the things that we've talked about earlier this week is in talking about solutions, we spoke along that vein of not just necessarily relying on what we've done in the past, but really trying to have conversations with people who are at risk for this violence, who are in communities that experience this at high levels, and really trying to discuss, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the solutions. And so, in your opinion, how can we, as folks in the community, as leaders in the community, how can we do a better job of asking the right questions to the quote unquote right people and really getting directly to, some of these issues? How can we reach out better, do you think?
I think the best way to reach out is to approach it as a doctor would approach a patient. So to analyze the illnesses, to write down some of the problems that we're dealing with. That poverty is an issue. We know that the lack of jobs are issues. So dealing with these different issues, we can address problems differently, and coming from a collective point of view from the community, we could address the situation in different ways. Different people could be assigned to talk to different people. It's just a lot that we can do. Yeah.
And I think that just that willingness to have those discussions, and to, of course, the pandemic makes it difficult, but to go where some of these problems are, I think is something that we probably can do a better job of as a community. And I know it's something we're endeavoring to do a better job of as a newspaper, for sure.
Correct. I also want to say, I think that's where the problem lies, just the disconnect, not having the ability to connect with, some of these people that might be in those situations or those problems.
Absolutely. Sheriff, I want to go to you. I know that your organization has worked with faith leaders to build some connections and to work with some solutions. I know there's various outreach programs that y'all have done. And you mentioned kind of in your intro the importance of the community working with y'all to address some of these issues and solve some of these issues and maybe even prevent some of these issues. So can you talk about what some of those outreach projects look like, and specifically how members of the community have come alongside the Sheriff's Department to kind of assist in this issue?
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. That's a good question. We have a variety of different outreach offerings and things that people can get involved in. COVID has sort of stopped that, but the most basic is our neighborhood watch program. We have groups all over the county that come together, to let us know what's happening. We've adopted the Zoom meeting protocol for a lot of those folks, so we can keep in contact with it. Our Concord project with the local ministers, where they have gone out and start ride with the deputies, and that has really had an impact, because some of these victims of some of these homicides, that group has reached out to those victims and has tried to uplift them and give them support. Our CHAMPS programs in the schools, our Explorer programs, even our Consider the Consequences program that that takes young people and goes back into the jail with them. But that's just one small part of it. Judge Colvin has been an instrumental partner in that particular program, and so it's that connecting with the parents to mitigate their issues. And it goes back to what some of the things Carl was talking about. People don't know what they don't know. Financial education about keeping up with your checking account, keeping credit, making sure you have good credit, that sort of things. One of the things that I have tasked my outreach, whenever we can do more of that person to person, is parenting skills. We're seeing so many of these cases here where these are young people involved and they themselves have young parents, and the parents are at their wits' end as to what to do. They don't feel like they have that support. They don't have those skills to adequately parent their child. So that's some of the underlying issues that we all need to address. And those are things that individuals like Jamie through Crisis Line, through Carl and his endeavors in the streets can really come together, because even though we really have a very good relationship with the citizens we serve here in Bibb County, there's still a little bit of reluctance of people to really open up to law enforcement, or that they don't feel that comfort level as they would with somebody who's maybe walked in their shoes, or someone who has navigated all of those obstacles and can show them the path out. So it's incumbent on all of us to come together, but the Sheriff's Office has always been a leader in that. Our new Restorative Justice and Outreach Center downtown, we just about to start the renovation work on that. COVID has slowed it down on that. We're about 6 months behind on where we would like to be in that, but maybe by the time it comes open, COVID will have loosened its grip a little bit, so we can do a little more person-to-person training and person-to-person meetings and help the individuals.
Absolutely. And thank you for that rundown, Sheriff. And Carl, I want to go back to you. And I know that you're involved with several kind of nonprofits, organizations that you started, or others that you kind of mentor folks through. Can you talk to me about kind of what do those kind of efforts fundamentally look like? What are some of the solutions or the resources that you're providing specifically to members of the community, and just help our readers kind of start to conceptualize what some of these things actually look like in practice?
Okay, so equality is something that I've started, and equality is just being equal in everything that you do. So equality really kicked off last year when the violence, the numbers started increasing, and I started hearing the community say different things like we need to do something. So I stepped out on a limb and I started to do the rallies at Tatton Square Park. And from there, that's where everything just blossomed. And I started to meet different people in the community, started to meet other activists that was active like myself. And I met a brother by the name of Fred Sturtevant, who has Fathers Amongst Men. And basically, we have the same idea. So we said, why reinvent something? Let's just work together. And Fathers Amongst Men is a nonprofit that works with fathers. And right now, we're working with the youth. We're doing the virtual learning. And we said that, getting with the youth at an early age and showing them, what responsibility is, different things that is needed in order to be a man. This would teach them how to be fathers. I also work with Project 32, which was named after the 32nd homicide, which was Devon Patton. Devon Patton was mentored by the founder, which is Joseph Mann, who was a coach at Ballard Hudson. And unfortunately, Devon passed away last year to, violence. And from there, we felt that we needed to do something. And the goal of Project 32 is to take 32 individuals and work with them throughout the year, mentor them, take them to different places, show them new things, We would like to get with the colleges so where we can show them an experience on the college campus, and just doing different things in the community. We're doing Single Mom Mondays. We're doing My Birthday, My Wish, where whatever the child wishes for their birthday, we provide that for them, whether it's a birthday party or just something that they would like. And doing all of this, the purpose is to just bring the community together, to uplift, to show positivity, because me being from the streets or once a criminal, I know that the influence of negativity can take over a person. And if you're consumed in negativity, that's what your reality is going to be. So I try to do as much positive things as possible in the community to show the community that, hey, you know, there is an alternative to the negative that you see every day on TV, on the news, and just life, period. So that's what we're trying to do with these nonprofits. Right now, we're going into February, which we're going to do a 28 Days of Impact. February 6th, we're doing a community cleanup right here on Roy Street and Bartlett Street. And we're trying to get everybody out to just show that we can work together, the unity is there. We will be cleaning off a lot on Roy Street that we will be turning into a community garden, and we'll have hen houses out there, showing the community the importance of gardening, how to raise your own food, especially in times like this, dealing with COVID. So that is definitely the direction, just being an alternative to the negative and staying on the positive route. So.
Yeah, I think in listening to kind of the wide variety of things that you and the organizations you work with are doing, it seems like a lot of the focus, as you mentioned, obviously is on positivity, but it's also meeting some really kind of basic needs, giving, single parents a chance to have a good time and have folks, have quality childcare while they're doing that, or making sure children have presents for their birthdays, or helping folks realize.
That was a point that, David Sheriff made in his conversation when he was saying about, parenting skills. But when you look at today's parents, they really don't have the time to parent because they're trying to survive. They're trying to provide for their kids. So the kids are left to fend for themselves. And a lot of these homicides that we have seen, they have been young age individuals who are left to fend for themselves, unfortunately. So having opportunities like this, places to go where the kids can have an outlet and just use the resources that are presented to them, I think we need more of that. Yeah,
definitely. And I think there's an elegance to the simplicity of some of these solutions. Sometimes it's not necessarily about, sometimes people ask me this, Sheriff, and I'm sure you get the same question. People are like, how do we stop this? And it's like, well, our reporter, Joe Kovac Jr., will respond. If they knew how to stop it, they would have done it by now. But the more specific thing is maybe there are some simple solutions that, like Carl was speaking about, that we can just make progress in those areas that can really have a long-term meaningful impact down the line on eventually what we see in terms of violence.
That's the truth, and it does. And I can tell you that we're not going to arrest our way out of this, because we had 50 homicides, 40 people arrested, 5 more suspects. These are all unique people, so they're all being arrested. So they're not out committing them again. So we're seeing that those conditions that are present that cause these type of violent acts need to be mitigated. Law enforcement plays its part, but all of us as a community in these simple things like cleaning up. One thing I sort of applaud, new Mayor Miller about some of this blight and some of the trash cleanups and those kinds of things to sort of give some of these neighborhoods some hope, to show that the government and the county cares about them. We've been doing that at the sheriff's office level for a number of years. We cleaned up the area they used to call the field over off of Pine off of Mosley Avenue, and so it made a very significant impact in that neighborhood. So I do know how that community cleanups and these taking care of these blighted conditions can have an impact in a neighborhood. So it does take all of us to do these various different things in our own roles and in partnership with others to really affect some change. And I've read some articles when it talks about gun violence, violence overall, and gun violence in particular. On the national level, the CDC years ago started looking at gun violence as almost like an epidemic and approaching it as an epidemic, sort of like we have with COVID and things like that. But because of politics, that funding didn't come through. But I think maybe hopefully we can look at that, because it is almost an epidemic or a type of thing to be studied, and look at some of the underlying causes and look at addressing those that would eventually stop that epidemic of violence.
Absolutely. And speaking of that and some potential solutions, Jamie, I want to go to you and talk to us a little bit about how can people reach out to your organization if they need help, and then also what could we do as a community to come alongside y'all and assist in your efforts. Obviously the services that you all provide are a little bit more specialized than probably the average person could come and help, but I'm sure there are ways that we can assist. So how can people reach out to you, and how can we help?
Sure. So the same way that someone who's in need of our services would reach out, anyone who's interested in maybe volunteering or donating can also call our 24-hour hotline. That number is 478-745-9292. And they can call that number. We also have a volunteer application and a donation button on our website, which is cl-sh.org. And those are some ways that just individuals can get involved. I will say that right now we've sort of put a pause on our volunteer program because of the pandemic. We expect maybe in the fall we can start to really use volunteers again. Right now, that's just something we've put on pause. But one thing that I want to say as we talk about the community is that we were Crisis Line and Safe House was funded for a 4-year planning and implementation grant for a family justice center. A family justice center is a one-stop shop for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, some other things that sort of fall under that umbrella, like elder abuse or human trafficking. And at this center, it's a place where nonprofit organizations, community organizations, government entities can come together at one place where a victim can walk in and meet with someone who can help navigate which of those services and which of those entities they'd want to interact with. And so Sheriff Davis has signed on in partnership with this to begin working on planning and implementing this project. It doesn't exist yet. It won't exist for a couple of years, but we're really excited about the opportunity. The Sheriff's Office, Civil Legal Services, the Child Advocacy Center, the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center will all come together and to find a way to collaborate and provide services. And family justice centers have been implemented across the country. The first one opened, I want to say probably 20 years ago, maybe 25 in San Diego, California, and has since spread across the country. But the data coming out of those family justice centers are that, they've seen a reduction in homicides. They've seen an increase in victim safety. They've seen a reduction in anxiety and fear for survivors and their children in reporting the incidents that have happened. They see communities with a family justice center see an increased collaboration amongst community partners, which I think is something we've all agreed is key. And also an increase in community support for the types of interventions that would be put in place for those victims. And then also an increase in prosecutions for domestic violence or sexual assault offenders. And so we're really looking forward to the opportunity to work with our community partners and to talk to the community more about this project. It is very new. We were just funded in November, and we just hired a site coordinator for that project that began on January 11th. So it may be a little while before we're really able to start talking about it in the community in a bigger way than what we are right now. But it is something that we were funded for a 4-year project to implement. So we're really glad to have that. We're one of only 3 sites in the state of Georgia that was funded. And so we're really excited to see how that benefits the survivors in our community and how it helps all of us to collaborate better in addressing domestic violence and sexual assault.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I'm really glad you brought that up. And we're excited to kind of pay attention to that as that center is built and different folks get involved in it and get to see the impact of that on our community. And that, I mean, what a blessing to have in Middle, like you said, there's only a handful of those that have been funded. And so that's really remarkable. So thank you for sharing that, Jamie. Carl, I want to go to you next. How can folks in the community who are watching this help you? What are ways that they might be able to come alongside or interact with you or the organizations that you're working with? How can we help?
For the different events that we have, I mean, people could, of course, show up, the cleanups, participation, connect with us. Fathers Amongst Men, we have the website. We're at 524 Bartlett Street every day. People can come there, and we want to open our doors like a resource center. You know, we have Wi-Fi, everything. So, I mean, people can always come. I'm constantly on Facebook promoting new things so people could get at me there. We just created a radio station for the purpose of broadcasting and staying, on the airwaves so people could find out what we're doing. So that's how people could connect with us.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing that, Carl. And I'm excited. And remind me, you said February 6th, there's a cleanup event, right? Where's that going to be again? Yes,
that's going to be at 524 Bartlett Street. We're going to meet there, and we're going to be cleaning up Roy Street, which is right around the corner from Bartlett Street.
And what time's a good time for people to show up if they want to help out?
9:30.
Perfect. I love it. Fantastic. We're excited about that, Carl.
Thank you.
And then, Sheriff, to go to you, kind of, I want to ask the same question and kind of lead into it with the question about, I know that one of the, and I don't know specifically that this is something that you've brought up. And so if it is, I apologize, but I know that there has been some conversations in the community about the number of deputies that you have on staff. And obviously, since the merger, went from police department and a sheriff's department to just sheriff's department. In terms of ways that the community can help, do you feel like allocating more resources to your department for either staffing or salaries would be a way to do that? And what are some other ways that people could help?
Well, they could apply and come to work for us. That's one of the things that we're looking for now. We have hired a few deputies over the past few months. We continue to look. The commission passed the new pay scale. Our new starting salary for sworn deputies is over $40,000 a year now. So that has brought us very competitive with other agencies. That starting salary for someone who's already certified, who has already had law enforcement experience, the starting salary for someone who doesn't have any experience is up higher than other places. It's up to like 36 now, 36,000. So we are attracting some applicants. So that's one of our biggest things. But one of the things that we do with all of these 50 homicides that we have, the hundreds of other calls, the thousands of other calls that we answer, we're going to do the job. Our investigators are going to be out there. They work a lot of overtime, but it doesn't stop them. It doesn't deter them from doing their duty. Even with shortages, even with the struggles that we've had, pandemic-wise and everything, they have done a phenomenal job of solving these cases, and they continue to work every single day. But the one thing that I could ask people, if you want a life in law enforcement and want to make a real change in your community for the good, consider coming to work at the sheriff's office. We are a full service law enforcement agency. We have patrol, criminal investigation, canines, outreach, forensics, all of those aspects you would think about in a big city police department. We have them here and are certainly open and willing to train somebody and get them. I'm a product of that myself. Started in 1979, worked my way all the way up. And when I first started, there was no way in the world I ever thought I'd ever be sheriff of Bibb County. So you get in it and you find that love of the community and love of job. And so you're able to make a difference. That is the main thing, is able to make that difference, whether you are out here connecting with a young person or out arresting a person that has possibly committed a bad crime, but you are impacting the community. And that's what we need from that. And I will say the commissioners, both in the past administration and this administration, going forward are have worked with us and worked with us to give us the resources now with the pay and equipment and things like that that we do need. So we have a good working relationship with that, and we want to see that continue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, I want to thank all three of our panelists for joining us this afternoon. I know this hour went by super fast for me. It probably did for you too. It's kind of always the experience with this, but I can't thank you enough for. I know that all of you are busy and you all are doing some tremendous work in our community, and I hope that this discussion sparks some ideas and drives folks who can help or who need y'all towards y'all's organizations and efforts. And look forward to speaking with each of you again soon about how we can partner together to make our community better. So thank you for being leaders in our community and for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
And I want to thank you, all of our subscribers who logged on to join us during your lunch hour for this discussion. This is the first one of these kind of panel discussions that I've hosted. We're looking to host more in the future, and hopefully this is the first in line of several discussions that we're able to participate in and lead, hopefully at some point in person, but for now, certainly virtually. And so we definitely appreciate your time and the folks who sent me questions beforehand and all of those things. If you have ideas for other topics to discuss or other folks we should reach out to, stories that we need to report on, or other ways that we can address either violence or other issues in our community, I encourage you to reach out directly to me. My email is just my first initial, C, and then my last name, Slinkard, which is up there on the screen, SLINKARD @Macon.com. Again, that's C, Slinkard @Macon.com. And I look forward to hearing from you, and we'll talk with you, all of you soon. And thanks for being a supporter of the Telegraph, and we appreciate your time. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day.